Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? It's your boy, The Doc, and we're back for the Week 15 injury update show. You guys know the deal by now. Each and every week, I, an actual doctor, will go through the entire NFL slate, tell you guys about all the fantasy injury news that you need to know about for your team so that you can just sit back and relax. And we got a lot of games to talk about, so let's jump into it. All right, guys, as always, we're going to start with a moment of silence for all the players whose fantasy season did end due to injury. First up, we got quarterback Justin Herbert dealing with the finger fracture, had surgery on that throwing hand finger, will make a full recovery by next season, but just know he is done for the year. You can go ahead and drop Justin Herbert. And at this point, we can all agree you can probably just drop anybody on the Chargers. We'll talk about Thursday Night Football here in a minute, but it looked pretty bad. Browns left tackle Jedrick Wills and right tackle DeJuan Jones both out for the year now with injuries to their knee. They both had surgery. They're both done for the year. We're down to the backup left tackle and the third string right tackle for the Browns. That could affect their team as a whole. I know that offensive linemen don't score fantasy points, but just know that they are now down to backups kind of across the board on the offensive line. And then Dolphins center Connor Williams dealing with an ACL tear. He is having a fantastic season, so a big bummer for them. And from this point forward, anybody who gets put on the IR is done for the year from fantasy for fantasy purposes. So just know that if you got a player that gets put on IR next week, they're done for the year. You can go ahead and drop them as soon as you find out about it. We will talk about Thursday Night Football. It was an absolute blowout in the first half. I haven't seen the end of the game yet, but as far as I can tell, the Chargers have rolled over and died. And wide receiver Keenan Allen dealing with a heel injury, not playing in that game. I'm not surprised he didn't want to play given how bad they looked, but I am a little bit worried that we might not see a guy like Keenan Allen again. The team is clearly packing it up, ready to go home. They're not trying to make the playoffs anymore. I really think it's time to see some of the younger guys step up and get a chance to see what they have with them, but I'm probably just staying away from the Chargers as a whole. As for the Raiders, running back Josh Jacobs dealing with a quad injury. He missed last night's game. Wide receiver Devontae Adams played through an illness. Looked like he was playing fine, but as of halftime, hasn't scored a touchdown yet. So hopefully that changed by the time you're watching this. And then they are down two offensive linemen, Colton Miller and Andre James, both down. But again, 42 points in the first half. Clearly the Raiders were not hurting on the offensive side of the ball. Moving on to the Saturday games. We got three games on Saturday this week. Vikings at the Bengals. Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson dealing with a rib injury. He was very disappointing in his first game back from the hamstring strain. He did get hit pretty hard. They were worried that maybe he had some internal injuries, so he left the game, went to the hospital, but everything checked out okay for Justin Jefferson. He is expected to play in this game. Guy actually got a full practice in on Thursday, so I do think that Justin Jefferson is going to play. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping that he can put up a couple good weeks here for the fantasy playoffs if you held on to him that long and still made the playoffs. Running back Alexander Madison dealing with an ankle sprain, didn't practice all week, is not expected to play in this Saturday game. Ty Chandler could be in for a career day in terms of total touches. As for the Bengals, no real injuries to talk about there, so we're going to move over to the Steelers. At the Colts, Steelers quarterback Kenny Pickett dealing with the ankle sprain has already been ruled out for this game. He's not going to play. Mitch Trubisky is going to probably get the start, but they did mention that Mason Rudolph is going to get more of a look as an option at the quarterback position for the Steelers. Wide receiver Deontay Johnson has a knee injury, kind of a late addition to the injury report. Didn't practice on Wednesday. Apparently, this is a new knee injury, not related to the hamstring issue he had before, but I don't really have a whole lot of info on it as of recording this, so he's going to be a game time decision. Hopefully, he's practicing in full on Friday. And then linebacker Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, both the star edge rushers for the Steelers, were in concussion protocol. Both of them look like they're on track to play this week, despite the fact that they're playing just 6 days after suffering those concussions. A little bit of tomfoolery going on with the TJ Watt concussion. They put him in a visor, and then we found out he had a concussion after the game. It just kind of suspicious. Don't like to see that from the Steelers, knowing that it felt like a very 70s move to put him in a visor to block out the sun. I'll be curious if the NFL doesn't investigate that a little bit. As for the Colts, running back Jonathan Taylor's already been ruled out. He's had thumb surgery, expecting to miss a few more weeks. You're holding on to him just in case he comes back, but just know it's probably a couple weeks away still with that thumb injury. Zach Moss, a better matchup than he's had the last couple of weeks. Hopefully he can capitalize on it, but again, not very promising the last 2 weeks. Last game of the Saturday slate, Broncos at the Lions. No real injuries to talk about in this game, so we're going to move right in to the early Sunday slate. Falcons at the Panthers. Falcons offensive line is banged up right now. 3 offensive linemen have been missing practices this week due to injury. I know that they don't score fantasy points, but just be aware that they are hurting on the offensive line. Left tackle Jake Matthews has an ankle injury. Right guard Chris Lindstrom has an ankle injury as well. And then right tackle Caleb McGarry also dealing with a knee issue. Could affect the guys like Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and just the offense as a whole. As for the Panthers, tight end Hayden Hurst, kind of a sad story here with him still dealing with concussion symptoms. Limited practices last week, now not practicing again. Again, not expecting Hayden Hurst to play and probably not see him again in the fantasy season. He's droppable for me if you're still holding on hope that maybe he can come back. Moving on to the Bears at the Browns. Bears wide receiver DJ Moore dealing with an ankle sprain. Limited on Thursday. Put up a solid stat line last week, but picked up an ankle injury. Didn't look like it really happened during the game. I didn't see any indication that he really got rolled up on or anything. So again, I'm expecting him to play, still be heavily involved. As for the Browns, running back Jerome Ford dealing with a wrist injury. Limited practices so far this week. A little bit of an issue, but I do expect him to be able to play through it. He should be a fine start against the Bears defense. Wide receiver Amari Cooper is still resting due to the rib injury. Full practice on Thursday, though. He's a solid wide receiver 2 option. Joe Flacco absolutely slinging the ball right now. Don't be afraid to start Amari Cooper. And then running back Kareem Hunt dealing with the groin injury that's kept him limited the last month or so. He did manage to score again last week, but very touchdown dependent going forward. Not really someone I'm looking to start unless it's a deep league and I need a starter at the running back position. Again, I do expect him to play in this game. Heading over to the Buccaneers at the Packers. Bucks wide receiver Chris Godwin picked up a knee injury, not practicing this week due to that knee injury that he suffered at some point during the game. His snap counts were on pace for what his normal snap counts are, so I didn't really see anything that said that he picked up like a major knee injury here. But again, kind of surprising with the back-to-back DNPs to start the week. He's going to be a game time decision unless he practices on Friday. Then I would expect him to play. A lot of defensive injuries for the Bucs right now. Devin White is back practicing in full. He should play and return. Jamal Dean also practicing in full, should be able to return in this game. But Vita Vea and Carlton Davis, 2 guys for the Bucs that I don't expect to play due to their injuries. Moving on to the Packers here, we got 14 players on the injury report, including some big defensive guys. Not going to spend a lot of time on them because they've been missing games. If you want me to talk about them, let me know in the comments and I can let you guys know down there. But wide receiver Christian Watson dealing with that hamstring strain, not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. Kind of a disappointing end of the year here for Christian Watson. He's got a really nice playoff schedule. Romeo Doubs becomes a guy that you can start pretty consistently in the flex spot if you need him, just because the schedule is great. It's just that Christian Watson hasn't been healthy. Wide receiver Jaden Reed dealing with the ankle sprain. Last few weeks he had a chest injury, but this week it's the ankle injury. I do expect him to be able to play, but he is limited with another issue here. Running back Aaron Jones coming back from the MCL sprain. Back-to-back limited practices. He said in interviews that he expects to play in this game, that he's feeling better. I'm going to say he's a game time decision, but again, trending towards playing based on what he said and how he's practicing. And then running back A.J. Dillon dealing with a broken thumb. He actually came out and said he broke his thumb at the end of the game last week. Not practicing this week. Does not look like he's going to be able to play unless they give him one of those huge clubs, which again, not really something you want with your running back. I doubt that we see A.J. Dillon playing this game. If for some reason both of those guys don't play, Patrick Taylor seems to be a guy that you could pick up off waivers and possibly start against this Bucs defense. It's not going to be a great start, but it's something. Moving on to the Jets at the Dolphins. Jets running back Breece Hall dealing with an ankle sprain. Limited practices so far. Actually played really well last week for what seems like the first time in ages. Still got the juice when the offense actually gives him the ball in space and lets him do some work. He's an RB2 for me this week. Probably startable in most formats. Dolphins running back Devon Achane dealing with a toe injury now. Remember, he was dealing with a knee injury that put him on IR, but now it's a toe issue. So new injury here for him. Moderately effective last week, mostly in the passing game. Did get above 10 PPR points, but that was mostly on dump offs that he didn't really do a whole lot with. Not practicing, he's going to be a game time decision. But based on the fact that I think this is turf toe, I would not be surprised if he missed this game. As for wide receiver Tyreek Hill, he's dealing with the ankle sprain. On video, it looked like a high ankle to me, but he was able to return, so it's possible that it was just a low ankle sprain. He's not practicing, though. Sometimes with these ankle injuries, they're able to return during the game because they're able to tape it up immediately before it starts swelling. Once that swelling sets in, the pain sets in, the adrenaline isn't pumping anymore. You see this often with NFL players where they come back and play in a game and then they end up missing the next game because that ankle swelling and pain creeps in throughout the week now that they're not actively playing in a game. He's going to be a game time decision. If he's playing, obviously you're starting Tyreek Hill. Moving on to the Giants at the Saints. Giants tight end Darren Waller coming back from IR, was limited in his first practice back. I do think he's expecting to play. I would expect him to play in this game, but just no, very risky start coming off the hamstring injury. The tight end position is so weak, though. I'm not going to blame anybody if they need a starter at the tight end position. If you're starting somebody like a Cade Otton or someone that's just not very good at that position, don't be afraid to throw Darren Waller in there. See what kind of juice he can give you. As for the Saints, wide receiver Chris Olave dealing with the ankle sprain, not practicing so far this week. Very mild week last week after 3 straight really big games. Prior to week 14, he did save his week last week with a touchdown, but picked up this ankle injury, missing practices. He's going to be a game time decision, trending towards possibly missing this game. As for tight end Taysom Hill, he's coming back from foot and hand injuries. He's back practicing in a limited capacity. I'd expect him to be able to play. And then wide receiver Rashid Shaheed coming back from the quad strain, limited practices. Assuming he's able to play, he kind of limits the upside if both he and Chris Olave are playing for Chris Olave. So not really someone I'm looking to start, but it does look like he's going to be able to come back. Maybe a little bit of a bump for the offense as a whole, but again, he's more hurting than helping for our fantasy teams. And of course, running back Kendre Miller not practicing at all with his ankle injury. I doubt we see him again this season. Moving on to the Texans at the Titans. Texans quarterback CJ Stroud dealing with a concussion. Back-to-back DNPs for him so far this week, not looking like he's trending towards playing. Davis Mills going to get a start this week if CJ Stroud can't go. I'm hoping he can. I got a few leagues where he's my only quarterback left. I don't want to start Davis Mills, but again, the quarterback position absolutely mauled by injuries so far this year. Wide receiver Nico Collins dealing with a calf strain. He's not practicing either. I'll admit that this one really hurt me in a lot of leagues. I had multiple leagues where I had Nico Collins going in must-win games. And of course, an early calf injury basically ruined his week. If you had an injury like that killed you, let me know about it in the comments. We can sulk together in the comments about losing must-win games due to injury. It's always the worst, but it does look like with Tank Dell on IR, with Nico Collins probably missing this game. Noah Brown's the last man standing for the Texans, but he hasn't scored a fantasy point since week 10. So again, not really someone I'm dying to get into my fantasy lineups, but somebody I will get into my fantasy lineups this week is tight end Dalton Schultz. He's dealing with the hamstring strain. He's back practicing in full. They have to use him if all of these wide receivers are hurt. I would not be surprised if he got over 10 targets. He's someone I'm throwing in just to see what will happen if I need some boom potential out of my tight end position. And then they got a couple defensive starters that look like they're going to miss this game as well. Will Anderson Jr. has a high ankle sprain. He's not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. And then Blake Cashman, their starting linebacker, also has a hamstring strain. He's not looking like he's going to play either. So the Texans are really falling off the wagon right now in terms of injuries. As for the Titans, they're only really worried about defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons dealing with a knee injury. He's not expected to play this week as well. Moving on, last game of the early Sunday slate, we got Chiefs at the Patriots. Chiefs running back Isaiah Pacheco dealing with a shoulder contusion. They said contusion. Contusion means bruise. I'm calling BS on this. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm kind of irritated by this. I think they're playing some tomfoolery with us because usually contusions don't mean missed games. And so I know that this is the same shoulder that he hurt last year. I'm guessing this is probably some type of sprain. They're just calling it a bruise. And if it is just a bruise, it's a very serious bruise. Okay. Very surprised to see him missing last week. Looks like he's not going to be able to play this week. But unlike last year, it's an even split right now between Jerick McKinnon and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm giving the edge towards McKinnon because I know that Pat Mahomes trusts him in the red zone more. And I think the team trusts him in the red zone more. So he's got a little bit more touchdown upside, but just know they're splitting pretty evenly after we saw last week. As for the Patriots, they got running back Rondé Stevenson dealing with the high ankle sprain, back-to-back DNPs. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to return this week. And then wide receiver Demario Douglas coming off the concussion. He's back practicing in a limited capacity. Again, one of those situations where when the guy comes in, it's not necessarily like you really want to start him, but it does muddy up the waters for everybody else. Just know Demario Douglas probably coming back for the Patriots this week. All right, guys, let's head into the midday slate and wait. Yeah, no, we have a live to me update that Davante Adams did manage to score a touchdown in the second half of that game. I willed that into existence during this recording, but let's talk about the midday slate. 49ers at the Cardinals. 49ers got defensive issues on the injury side of things. Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, and Charvarius Ward all not practicing so far this week. Doesn't look like any of those guys is going to be able to play in this game. Normally it's the offensive side of the ball that's banged up for the 49ers. The defense a little bit weak this week, but I still expect that they're going to be good enough to beat the Cardinals, who have wide receiver Marquise Brown coming off the bye with the heel injury that he had prior to it. Still limited in practice, is expecting to play. I expect him to, but I'm not throwing him into my lineup. Has only finished inside the top 52 wide receivers one time since week 9. He is best left on the bench. Quarterback Kyler Murray dealing with a thumb injury, showed up on the injury report, but not limited in practice. Doesn't sound like this is really anything. I do expect him to play. Commanders at the Rams. Commanders running back Brian Robinson dealing with that hamstring strain. Another guy coming off the bye week that didn't seem to make a whole lot of strides. Not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. If Antonio Gibson's still rolling around on waivers, maybe pick him up. He might be worth a start this week. As for the Rams, wide receiver Tutu Atwell dealing with the concussion, not practicing. He's had his moments this year, but if I'm going to be honest, this concussion does free up the cloudiness at the wide receiver position for the Rams. A lot of targets going to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Another guy coming back, though, is Tyler Higbee, tight end for the Rams, dealing with the neck injury. He watched rookie Davis Allen make play after play last week and decided that his neck just isn't as sore as it once was. He should be able to suit up in this game. Not a great fantasy option. We'll see if they still stick with the rookie after his big week last week. And then last game of the midday slate, we got Cowboys at the Bills. Cowboys are pretty healthy, so we'll talk about Bills tight end Dalton Kincaid dealing with thumb and shoulder issues. Limited practice so far. He is banged up with two separate issues here, but I do expect him to play in this game. He is touchdown dependent now with Dawson Knox coming back into the fold, but just know Dalton Kincaid a little banged up this week. Moving on to Sunday night football, we got Ravens at the Jags. Good game here for Sunday night. Ravens, no real injuries to talk about. But for the Jags, we got quarterback Trevor Lawrence coming off the high ankle sprain, or what looked like a high ankle sprain. Apparently, those are just not a big deal anymore. He is managing to play through it. He is practicing in full, and despite throwing 3 picks, was still a top 12 quarterback last week. He's locked in as a starter again this week. And then running back Travis Etienne still dealing with the rib injury. He's limited in practice, but it hasn't been an issue really for him playing. He should be able to play in this game. And finally, last game of the week, Monday Night Football, Eagles at the Seahawks. Eagles, no injuries to talk about. Seahawks are banged up at the quarterback position, though. Geno Smith ended up missing last week's game with the groin strain, limited in practice so far this week. But again, it was just a walkthrough because it's Monday Night Football. Very surprising to see him missing last week's game. Big game against the 49ers. So we'll see if he's able to play in another big game against the Eagles. Should get some practice time in, but is going to be a game time decision. I'm looking elsewhere at the quarterback position if I can. And then both running backs, Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, totally off the injury report. So a little bit of good news to end the report this week. All right, guys, want to thank you for watching the injury update show. If I missed anybody, let me know in the comments down below. I want to thank our sponsors once again, Manscaped. Use code Headliners, get 20% off plus free shipping on your first order. Christmas right around the corner. Make sure you get those orders in over at Manscaped. And definitely check out our friends at pristineauction.com. We're still waiting to hit that goal, guys. 750 likes on this video. I will give something away from Pristine Auction. Make sure you hit the like button if you're waiting this long. Might as well just hit the like button, but head over to Pristine Auction regardless. Use the code Headliners when you sign up. Let them know that we sent you so you can get entered to win a bunch of free stuff that we're giving away thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction. Of course, if you're playing fantasy football, maybe you didn't make the playoffs for some reason, make sure that you're playing daily fantasy over at Underdog Fantasy. Use the code Headliners, get a $100 first deposit match. Just because your season's over doesn't mean you can't be playing some fantasy football and win a little bit of money with the Headliners. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you get a bunch of fantasy playoff wins. The doc is out.